I think you should care about your accounting because it has a massive impact on your gain on sale, hopefully. So that, hopefully that is reason of itself to care about accounting. In terms of third-party property managers, if you're managing money for other people, they call it trust accounting. You're then going to have to register with your state and you're subject to audits because these regulators want to know that, you're handling, if you're Mark Kappelman's money correctly or Whitney Sewell's money correctly.
Are you about to start a podcast or producing a podcast and tired of doing the editing yourself? We have produced over 1,000 daily shows, and the production team I've created called Vox Valens Media is now available to produce shows for you as well. We can do as little or much as you need, from finding and communicating with guests, preparing introductions, to editing the audio and video. You will sound better, have a more professional presence, and be able to spend your time doing more valuable tasks in your business. Let me know if you're interested by emailing me directly at whitney@lifebridgecapital.com. This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. We are back again today with a series of shows, or actually a couple that we did with Mark Kappelman. He's an accountant, he's CPA. He's grown a large firm now of over 100 accountants doing books and accounting for lots of businesses, real estate businesses. And we are diving into so many topics with him around this subject so you can do this well. It's a topic which if you were here yesterday, which I encourage you to go back and listen to the show, you're going to hear us talk about so many things that maybe you haven't heard of before. And maybe you need to go dive in a little further so you can become an expert in that part of the business, right? Or so you know what you're talking about when your CPA is asking you about the P&L, right? You know what that means and where that is in the P&L that he's even asking about. Doesn't mean you have to be a CPA or a really an expert, but you do need to be able to talk the talk, to say the least. So, and you're going to learn more of that from Mark today. That's interesting. You say like the more junior or senior level accounting or accountant. And I was going to ask you, where would outsourcing typically play? Would it be more junior? Could it be senior? And then you have somebody junior in-house? It would seem like an odd scenario, but what does that typically look like?
Yeah, look, we bring all of those to the engagement. So the way we're staffed in-house is we've got a team of bookkeepers that are adding the bills and reconciling the banks. We've got an account manager that's reviewing the bookkeeper's work and being the primary point of contact with the client. And then we have on our staff controllers that were controllers previously at property management companies or developers or syndicators that now work for us. And the difference is they're allocated a small amount of time to each client each month because most clients don't need a full-time controller. Maybe you guys are different. You guys are quite large. But a lot of clients, they only needed a controller for a few hours a month. They needed just somebody to review the financials to make sure that it passes the sniff test of there's not something glaringly wrong with the P&L or the balance sheet. And that's where this controller, CPA, accountants with 10 plus years experience come into play. And so that's kind of how we staff the engagement. So we have clients where we play the junior and the senior role. We have clients where we play the junior role, which was the example I gave before. We have other clients where they've got a junior person where we are actually the senior person on the account. So we can kind of play either spot. Hopefully that made sense.
I know we'll probably get into some more of this, but I wanted to ask you what the communication looks like. You're working with that team. Maybe you're the junior person or the senior, either one. But what does communication look like? That's been a difficulty for us, with, say, third party bookkeepers. I know, and even if they do a great job and they have a system or a portal that they're putting questions into, it's like it's sometimes difficult for us to get it back to them, right? How do you all handle that, and maybe how you've seen the most successful clients handle that?
Yep. I guess let's just take a step back. If we were engaged with LifeBridge, for example, we'd have an accounting email set up called lifebridge@rea.co, and we'd say, hey guys, send all of your bills that you want us to get into the system, forward them to that system. If you have any owner questions that come in, forward them to us. We'll answer those questions. That's kind of the main gathering spot for the questions, is this inbox. And then we tell people, hey, look, we're going to reply in 24 hours or less. Sometimes it's 48, but if it's an urgent item, put urgent in the email and we'll get back to you within 24 hours, right? That's kind of the primary way we communicate. But then in addition to that, if it's a big client, with a big operation, we're going to have a weekly call, weekly touch point. I always just say, hey, look, if we were an in-house accountant, you'd probably have a weekly meeting with your accountant. It's no different. We're your accountant. Let's have a weekly meeting. Other clients that don't need that might be a little smaller, we might do it once every 2 weeks. Once we get into a great rhythm, clients might say, hey, I don't want to do calls. We don't need to do calls. Get the bank recs done, get the bills in. Let's get the reporting done out by the 10th. And let's do a call maybe once a month or ad hoc calls, just when we have a pain point. That's really how we handle communication. Then, like I said before, of course, there's always those situations where you want to pick up the phone, or if you're in an office, you want to walk down the hall and talk to Mark or Whitney. In that case, we're not in your office, but just we give all of our phone numbers to the team. Give us a call. Don't answer, we'll call you right back. And if you're trying to get a hold of your accountant in-house.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I like what you said too. It's like if you have somebody in-house, you're probably going to have a weekly meeting with them anyway. And
Correct.
So why not go ahead and have that, even if the person is, outsourced versus being somebody hired on the team directly.
Whitney, I guess curious, if you don't mind me asking, how does that kind of compare to your cadence with how you guys are running your accounting today?
Yeah, so we've had a third-party bookkeeper for a few years now, and they've worked hard for us. I think they've done a good job. I think it's been, I think the call, as I was thinking about that, we've had different types of call. I know early on we also had a pretty frequent call, and then we've kind of pulled back from that. However, I do believe that would almost help hold some accountability to our team, right? By having that call. Or if there's outstanding questions of what is this transaction or what is this, supposed to be, that right there on the spot that they could just ask us. That probably would have been helpful, where I may not take the time or have the time every day to go in there and answer those questions. But hey, if we have that weekly call, we can knock out all those questions in 10 minutes.
Exactly.
What is this? Yeah. I just, and me or somebody on the team just spout out what it is, and they just knock through it right then, right? And so that's where I think like that call continually, at least for us, would be helpful, where we put, like you said, we kind of pulled back from that when we felt like, okay, we got a good rhythm, but then I feel like it kind of hurt us probably a little bit on not, keeping up with all their questions at times. But then it was more for us, some of the K1 issues has been on the, the CPA firm side as well, not as much as keeping. But then and maybe you can speak to this, the communication between our third-party bookkeeper and our CPA firm at the time, who are not our CPA firm now. I'll just say for investors that listen. But, the communication between those two, I think it was difficult, right?
Yeah.
And so how is that handled? I'll say I have my own CPA that I want to use, but I'm using you all for bookkeeping. What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. And let me add just one more thing, and then I'll come back to that, which is, because you just sparked a thought, is the communication works best when there's somebody internally that's deemed the accounting point of contact, right? The POC, if it's that controller we're working for, then it's kind of obvious. If it's a couple owners that have just outsourced it, it really helps if one person just takes the lead. And if they don't know the answer, they'll go around the company and figure out the answer. Because if nobody owns it, I was always taught, if there's more than one owner, nobody owns it. And so I would just say, I think, the accountability piece you're talking about, but when there's one designated person, that's what we always kind of shoot for in our onboarding. Now, in terms of taxes, what I would say is, and we've talked about launching a tax team group offering. It's just a very different business, so we haven't done it yet. But what we do is, at this point, we've got a couple CPA relationships that we refer people to, just to people that have done good work for our clients in the past. So I'd be happy to make a referral for you if you're actually in market. If you're not, don't worry about it. But then we've got a really good relationship with these organizations. So it's really easy for them just to email us directly. Hey, we need the trial balances. Hey, what is this? Hey, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know where I'm going. Of course, if it's a new CPA, then we just have to be responsive and good people. I used to work at CPA firms, so I understand the process and really get it. And our team does too. But obviously it works best when we continue to work with these kind of groups that we've done a lot of work with. But yeah, I mean, it's two different things. And that's what makes K1s can be challenging if, the tax firm, bookkeeping firm aren't on the same page.
Yeah, for sure. It is a struggle to make sure they're on the same page. This time of year, right? When it's like the busiest, most stressful time. for almost any accountant, right? Or CPA for K1s.
Yes. I know.
And you're even recording an interview. Congratulations to you while it's the busiest time of year.
I know. Hey, life never stops, does it?
So what about some other characteristics of the most successful clients that you have? Share some of those that as an operator, we should try to mirror, right? We should be trying to do these things to look like those most successful clients.
Well, I'll say a couple of things, and I'll think about it in terms of bank recs, AP, and reporting, because that's the easiest way to do it. So in terms of reporting, what I would say is, and I've always just learned this with my own business when I work for other clients, is the clients where we have the best financials is we've got a meeting every month to review the financials, right? There's actually a designated time. Everybody values that time, and they say, yes, after you've given to the financials, like we're actually going to have a conversation to go through it. And it's a set meeting. The second piece on that is, I would say all of our top clients have budgets in the system. Not everybody does budgets, but it just becomes a heck of a lot easier and a lot more efficient to do a month-end review when you've got a budget and your R&M, you're not just asking, well, hey, why did R&M spike? It's like, well, if in the budget, we knew that we were going to have something this month. It was planned that way. We have it every year. When you're looking at the T12, maybe it's not weird that it doubled because there's something unique about that month. It has for the last couple of years. So I think, clients that actually have budgets, that spend some time on those budgets, the financials are cleaner. You also catch a lot of those things that are just coded to the wrong category because it's like, hey, we should have an expense for this. Oh yeah, it's recoded to this and we reclass it. So I would say budget, spend time on financials. A set payable process is, I think, just a good discipline for any business. I don't know how you guys run that, but I think the tightest system we ever had was this client where she told all her vendors, hey, look, I pay twice a month. If you don't get me your bill by the 10th, you're not going to get paid on the 15th. I pay on the 15th and the 30th, and you need to get it to me 5 days before. If you don't get it to me on the 10th, you're not getting the 15th. If you don't get it to me by the 25th, you're not getting paid by the 30th. And everybody always knew that on those days we were doing pay runs, right? Check runs. And whereas we work with some other clients that want to pay bills daily, it just doesn't become a good operating rhythm. I think business, and hopefully you'd agree with me, it's like establishing cadences and rhythms and meetings and whatever that stuff looks like. But when you know that you're doing AP every other Thursday, you just know you've got it budgeted and you've got a process. And then I think just, last but not least, we work with a range of clients, and sometimes people don't have good segregation of duties. And now I'm thinking of like a third-party property manager. What we always tell people if they're starting from scratch is 3 bank accounts: an operating account for your trust fund, a security deposit account. Some people want to combine those, but if you're starting from scratch, I would say have it separate. And then your management account, and only pay for properties out of the operating account, only return the security deposits from that account. And, your management account is literally to collect your management fees and to pay your expenses of your property management company. And then for like an owner operator, some people have CapEx accounts just so it's almost like a savings account. But I would say, those are characteristics of quote unquote good, efficient clients. And I think the most efficient clients, just as I'm looking down at my notes, is people that are actually using the software. These softwares are actually really powerful. If you're using the work orders, or if you're using the maintenance, or there's a lot of people that are still not doing online bill pay or online ACH. Almost all of these softwares, you can pay bills, you can ACH, your vendors quickly. And a lot of people are still writing paper checks. And I get sometimes they want to use that as a control, but I think there's a lot of efficiencies to be had by just really leaning into the software. And I think that's where we help people a lot of times, is just kind of bringing them more tech forward, because they just don't know where all the bells and whistles are. And that's all we do all day long. Yeah. Well, so many great suggestions there. I hope the listeners will take many of them to heart or try to implement. Right. And it's a good list. So you just brought up software, which you suggest, right? And whether you may say, well, it depends, right? And depending on the size of your operation or where you're at, so some are very expensive as well, which I can attest to. But I would still like to know, hey, if budget's no option, which one does Mark like? What's your favorite and why? Appfolio is the most popular amongst our clients. And I guess, I think the depends answer is kind of important. If I just start with residential, I think AppFolio's got to be the market leader. I'd say, if you're in residential and you're less than 100 units, I would probably recommend Buildium. Works great. It's pretty simple. It's not overwhelming, and it's relatively affordable. I would say most of our clients that are over 100 units on the residential side, it can become there's a bunch of them, but AppFolio is kind of the biggest. But, we see, Resman is huge in Texas. I think a lot of our clients in Texas use Resman, and nationally too, but it seems to be super popular out there. Love that software. PropertyWare is big. RealPage is big. Entrata is big. We see all of those being used on the residential side, 100 units and up, but I would say AppFolio is the most popular. And then in terms of commercial, I think, because we haven't even got into that, but residential, commercial, so office, industrial, retail, etc. All the quote unquote big guys in commercial, from our experience, are using Yardi Voyager. And then Yardi's also got kind of a product that I think is trying to compete with AppFolio called Yardi Breeze. It's a little prettier. Yardi Voyager is a little more complicated, but it's probably the most powerful. And a lot of people use Yardi Voyager for residential, by the way, too. But Yardi has a lot of commercial CamRecs and some of these things that are kind of unique to commercial functionality built into them. And AppFolio does have that too. But I think my guess is if we looked at AppFolio's financials, majority of their business is residential, and Yardi's, I would say the majority of their business is commercial.
Okay, that's interesting. We use RealPage, and it was a big process to try to figure out which one, and that's been a massive expense, or investment, say, to switch to a platform like that. Obviously, as we brought management in-house, we just wanted to pay some top-notch technology that's going to help us to operate much more efficiently. And it has done many of those things that you mentioned, right? It's been a learning process. We're using many of their features, right, to help us in many aspects of the business. But and I'm not an expert in RealPage, but we have people on the team who are.
That's what you need.
And so that's been so helpful. And I think, like you said, and it's like so many things, whether it's a CRM or whatever it is, it's like pick one and you got to use it, right? That's the one that you use is the best. Right.
That's right. And they're all powerful. They're all powerful. So just keep that in mind.
So, speaking about your clients and which ones are most successful and why, who's your ideal client? What makes them the ideal client? Why?
So it's interesting. Like when we look at kind of our clients, approximately 70% of our clients are owner operators. And that's obviously a large percentage. And really the reason for that is, I think what I talked about earlier, which is like prior to starting REA, I was an owner operator. And so when we talk to owner operators, like this is what we focus on. And owner operator property accounting, bank recs and AP are no different, but the financial statement reporting is night and day different. And we kind of talked about that before, which is like for you guys, I'm guessing your deliveries each month are a P&L, a balance sheet, a cash flow, and NOI's got to be right. And you might be booking GPR, you might not be, which is gross potential rent. People that just accounting firms and we've got competitors that don't work with owner operators, right? Because it's very different. It's just, it's cash in, it's cash balance, rent in, expenses, ending balance, and it's an owner statement, a one-page owner statement. And there's, of course, intricacies and challenges and difficulties that both of them are challenging and require a lot of work, but it's a very different deliverable. And I think that kind of we've chosen to just focus on this owner operator thing because it's what I know. And then that's what we look for when we're hiring our in-house controllers and our account managers. And then once you start doing that, because I'd say the average accountant doesn't know how to record a closing statement. And if they do, the CPA is probably going to have a bunch of comments. And then when you go to dispose of that, right, the average property accountant doesn't know how to do a gain loss calc or handle a 1031. And so when it's almost like niching down within the niche, like we talked about before. And so for us, it's closing statements, it's sales, it's 1031s, these things that we just continue to see, and then we get good at it. And I think, that's why we've kind of chose to focus. But we've got a ton of third-party property management clients, so that's a huge part of our business too. It's just owner operator is the biggest.
How many clients or would you say is this even preferred or not from you all, have management in-house, or maybe they have some accounting staff, in their management company, or do they typically, maybe they have management in-house, but they let you all handle all the books, or what is that process?
Yeah, I don't know that percentage, but what I would say, Whitney, is like the way I define it between like we bucket people is you're either an owner operator, which means you own the assets and you have management in-house, or you're a third party manager, which is you're a property management company hired to manage properties for other owners. And so this is about 70% of our business, which is the owner operators. And the 30%, so those are the people that are in-house, just like your company, I believe. You own the assets, right? You have a bunch of LPs, and you've you've formed your own property management company to handle that. That's the biggest part of our business. And then the other piece is the third party managers. I don't know the percentages on like what percentage of our clients have an accountant on staff. Quite a few of them do, though.
And, talking about REA specifically, why are you all different, from other third party bookkeeping companies, or, and you're going to know them a lot better than I do, but what's going to make you all stand out, or maybe something the listener could be looking for as they're looking for, some way to outsource, or maybe options that they wouldn't even know that they should be asking about?
Yeah, I think it's two big things, and it's the one I just hit on, which is a lot of our competitors just don't work with owner operators. And if they do, they've never operated themselves, so they don't really understand it. So I think we just have a competitive advantage in terms of understanding the syndication and the LPs and the intricacies of getting that all done, and then working with the CPA firm and just making sure the K1s are right. I just think, early on in our business, we had competitors coming to us saying, hey, do you want to, we don't know how to handle this client. Can you help us with it? That was early days, but that would be a big point of difference. The other one is just, we've got a couple competitors that only work with clients on one or two softwares. And we took the approach a long time ago to say, look, what RealPage works for these guys, Entrata works for these guys, FLA works for these gals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's take the wide approach. We also just thought that was more defensive position for our company because, the more application, just the more diversified our client base is. And, in the process, I think we've built a pretty strong business.
Yeah, it's interesting, all the different platforms, and like you got to have somebody that's an expert on your team and all those systems if you're going to open up to them.
Correct. Yeah, it's different. It's harder, I would say.
Speak to educating yourself, or how would you tell a client to educate themselves on accounting, like how they can learn what they should know? It's because I feel like it's like this whole thing that's like I knew nothing about, right? But it's like I know that I need to know at least quite a bit about it. I can't become the CPA or the expert, and obviously doing the bookkeeping. However, I need to know that it's done right? I need to know enough to know what questions to ask and those things. How do you advise a client to educate themselves on the bookkeeping or the accounting that should be done for their business, specifically real estate?
That's a good question. I would say, look, it's not rocket science. It's not easy, but it's not rocket science. But I would say is, if you're an owner, I get that you're going to outsource a lot of things, but you still need to know enough to be dangerous. And just like you said, you don't know RealPage, but I would say, if you're an owner and just getting started with, whether it's you're hiring an in-house accountant or you're outsourcing it to REA or somebody else, there's trust but verify. It's what I was always taught in my business career is you got people younger underneath you doing stuff. You maybe don't have to review every single thing they do, but spot check things randomly, almost like an audit. And so what I would say at month end is when we say, hey, Whitney, the bank recs are done. Like, I think bank recs is where I would tell anybody to start, because most operators can kind of look at the P&L and be like, man, our rent, they know what their rent rolls are. And I'm thinking about owner operators, like every owner operator is super focused on the top line. They know if the rent's wrong, like, hey, that rent cannot be right. Right. And then we have to dig in to figure out why. But I think, bank recs, actually download the bank rec and review it. And a bank reconciliation is just saying, here's what the bank says. Here's what our books say. Are they the same? If not, here are the differences that explain why they're different. And if you don't understand it, then ask us on the next call. Or if you have an accountant in-house, ask them to explain it. And they should be able to explain it in layman's terms. And that's, I'd say, that's where I would start. Of course, in terms of bills, click into some bills and just make sure did we put in the right memo? Did we put in the required information? Did we plug it to the right property? Trust but verify. You don't need to be an accountant, but I'd say, at least apply yourself a little bit and look in the help center. And yeah, just I think trust but verify is the best thing I'd say.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And I want to move to a few final questions. However, before we do, anything else about just accounting that we haven't mentioned, or why listeners should even care about accounting? It's so important, and sometimes it gets overlooked, right? It's not and maybe an exciting thing. It should be exciting. However, I'm thankful that it's exciting to some, right? So, but what else? What else should we know? Or maybe I didn't think to ask you that the listeners need to know about accounting and why it's important, or something that could help them do it well.
Yeah. So I would say, look, if you're an owner operator, just as well as I do, is that assets are valued based on NOI. And so the financial babe and close trust, you better be feeling pretty darn confident that your NOI is right. And we're putting the right things below the line and the right things above the line. And of course, buyers are going to make their own adjustments. But I mean, look, you still have your baseline NOI, and everybody's going to be looking at that to start. So I think you should care about your accounting because it has a massive impact on your gain on sale, hopefully. So that, hopefully that is reason of itself to care about accounting. In terms of third-party property managers, if you're managing money for other people, they call it trust accounting. You're then going to have to register with your state, and you're subject to audits because these regulators want to know that, you're handling, if you're Mark Kappelman's money correctly or Whitney Sewell's money's correctly. And so you've got a fiduciary duty to your clients. And I think, look, at the end of the day, feeling confident in knowing your numbers, we've all talked to those people where you ask them about your business and the answers are super vague, and you can just kind of tell that they're not that close to your numbers. I think when you actually get close to your numbers, you can then start making decisions to change those numbers. And if you really understand them, like, wow, we are spending way too much on R&M. If you really get into the details and then keep plugging away and keep peeling back the onion, you kind of you start to realize the root of issues, and then you can make adjustments. And I think that can be applicable to any business, but it's no different in the real estate space as well.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. Mark, that's just, I don't know, great insight. We all need to know more about accounting and in our business specifically. I love to see, there was a quote you mentioned earlier. It's like the language of business.
Accounting is it's the language of business. And, I think you start to see that as you move up in the company. Before we didn't even talk about this, but after my public accounting days, I went and worked at a tech startup. And then when you start going into those management meetings, it's kind of clear because you start looking at P&Ls and balance sheets. And it becomes pretty obvious of the people in the room that understand it. But I don't care if you're the head of HR or the head of product or finance or marketing or whatever it is, people are going to hold you accountable to a P&L. And if you have no idea what that is or a balance sheet, then you're at a disadvantage.
Yeah, for sure. No, well said. I think that's incredible. A few final questions. Mark, what's the way you've improved your business recently that we could apply to ours?
Client segmentation, I think, is kind of what we obsess about. And that's kind of, as I was talking about, is just like application and really getting our teams and people focused on just, hey, we've got a team that only works on owner operators. We've got people that only work on third-party managers, like continuing to niche down within the niche. I think that's what we've been focused on and what I'm focused on daily.
What are some of the most important metrics that you track? Could be personally or professionally, either way.
Gosh. Well, from a business perspective, it's profits. I think, revenue's vanity, profits is sanity. I think, is that the line? I can't remember, but I worked at a tech startup and it was all about the top line. And it was always kind of hard for me as like a real estate accountant, because I'm like, but guys, like, let's look at the bottom line. So I think it's all about profits and focused on that. And then, in my personal life, I've got this iWatch that helps me set a daily goal and work out. And that's kind of holds me accountable.
And on that note, what about some habits that you're disciplined about that have produced the highest return for you?
Getting up early. I think, maybe it's cliche for a lot of people, but, my alarm has been set between 4 and 4:30 for like 10 years now. It all started way back in the day because I was studying for the CPA and the CFA before work. And now I've just done it to this day. It's super quiet. Nobody's emailing. I'm not fried. I know there's some night owls out there. More power to you. I'm not saying you have to be a morning person, but for me, it's a difference maker because I can usually get like an hour of just fresh work done when I'm not being bothered.
4 and 4:30. Now, I'm an early riser as well, but I'm not that early.
Yeah. Well, I go to bed earlier now, though, too. I got a couple little kids and end up crashing when they crash, and then I can still get, my 8 hours.
Are you very rigid about your like bedtime routine and wake up routine, like making sure you get a certain amount of sleep, or because some people are just all over that. And I just wonder how strict you are to get up that early.
Last night I got 6.5 hours of sleep. That's not enough. I prefer to get 8. I'm not like strict, but I'm usually just, if you get up at 4:30 and you go hard all day at work, and then you got kids and go hard with them, by the time it's like 8, 9 o'clock, you're shot. At least I am. I haven't figured out how to have unlimited energy yet. So I end up just by definition, just default getting 7, 8 hours. But I have found like in 2022, I really focused on getting more sleep just because I went the longest time of doing 6 hours. And I think it's painful and I don't think it's healthy.
Do you measure it in any way?
No. I tried. It was too much tracking. It was like, I couldn't.
What's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
I think studying and hard work, and I guess competitiveness. But, I've never considered myself the smartest guy in the room. I think I'm above average, but I've never considered myself the smartest. But I've just, when I did the CPA exam, I studied like crazy. I got plenty of buddies that are super smart that were like, I'm studying the minimum to pass the exam. Right. And I was like, I'm studying all that I can to make sure I don't fail. And so that to me, probably the number one. And then I'm just, I've played sports my whole life. I've always been competitive. I like to feel healthy and do well. And it just kind of, and I want to give back to my family. I guess I didn't get into that, but I think I've got my why dialed in. And so that helps me to just go hard every single day.
On that note, how do you like to give back?
Look, my wife and I were just talking about it because we're in the new year, and, our big thing this year is going to be just trying to do a little more volunteer work. That like in terms of like our city, we live in Chicago. We want to figure out ways to give back to Chicago. I'd say personally, the way I give back kind of within the business is just, as I've gotten older, you have more and more young people reaching out to you on LinkedIn or through email and asking for advice. And I just, I try to create space if I can for those people, whether it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, just to give them advice that I didn't have or wish I would have got 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Awesome. Mark, it's been an honor to have you on the show. And I'm grateful for your time, how you've given back to us. I mean, this topic is so important. If you're an operator, you got to have this dialed in, right? I mean, from the property level up to, getting your books in order so you can get your K1s out the door as quickly as possible, right? To help your investors. And so it's so important to have that pulse on your business in that way. And I'm grateful to have spent this time with you, Mark, and just helping educate our listeners and our investors and myself. And so grateful. Tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you and REA.
Yeah, I'd say, the easiest way is just to go to our website, www.rea.co, not .com, but .co. You can go and book a call with us. That'd be the easiest way to chat with us. But there's other sorts of resources on that site. My email is pretty simple, Mark, M-A-R-K, @rea.co. So I can always be reached there. But yeah, those would be, I'm on LinkedIn as well, but I'd say email and our website would be the two primary ways.
Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.